You're listening to At the Mic with Keith, an independent podcast production.
Welcome to another edition of At the Mic. I'm your host, Keith Malinak. Today is actually going to be part one of a two-part series as I sit down with the one and only Stu Burguiere. He's been the executive producer of Glenn Beck's radio show for many years, and he's the host of his own Blaze TV program, Stu Does America. He and I talked about how in the world he became a Toronto Blue Jays fan, the great story about his foul ball incident, the many jobs he's had, and of course, how he met Glenn in the first place. It was a fun conversation. Here's part one of two with Stu, technically Steve Burguiere. Stu Burguiere. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Very good, yes.
Good.
I've known you for a very long time, so you shouldn't be having problems with that anymore.
Yeah, but I do have an admission to that. You know, I was the call screener for the Glenn Beck radio program for quite a while.
Yes.
And for whatever reason, I needed to spell your name on a regular basis. People wanted to send you stuff to the show here at the studios, et cetera, and I'd give them the address.
Letter bombs and such.
Right, yes. And I remember I had taped above my position there where I screened the calls, your name spelled out. Because I could never remember, and I'm sure right now, I'm not even going to try.
Yeah.
I'm sure I could do it, but it would take a while.
It took my wife a while. She did not know how to spell her own name for quite some time. Eventually, you just memorize it. The hardest part being that there's 3 consecutive vowels, which is not normal. U-I-E.
Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, it's not, it's in the middle there somewhere. I can't track it down right now, but it's in the middle there somewhere. 3 vowels in a row, not common.
That's awesome. And I did not properly set this up. I did not explain right out of the gate your biggest title, which I'm sure you assume I'm going to say executive producer of the Glenn Beck radio program and host of Stu Does America on Blaze TV.
I mean, sure.
That's not where I'm going.
Not where you're going.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am talking to the number one Canadian sports celebrity.
That's true.
Stu Burguiere.
That is true. I'm known throughout Canada. I was on a lot of Canadian media, at least one weekend.
Take us to that weekend and that experience that you had there at the Toronto Blue Jays game. Your front row. That was a couple years ago. What happened?
Yeah, so
I know you've told this story a million times.
No, well, it's a fun one. So I am a Toronto Blue Jays fan.
Mm-hmm.
I was on a Little League team called the Blue Jays when I was 5.
Is that how that
So
happened?
that's how that started, and I
Yeah.
became a Blue Jays fan. We went 7-3 that year, by the way.
Nice.
And I just became a fan, and it stuck with it the whole time. So, there's some good years there. 92-93 World Series. Then it got a little cold, little dark period for Toronto, the Toronto Blue Jays, which I of course refer to as America's team.
Well, they are in the American League. Let's be honest.
There you go. Very good. So I would occasionally, whenever the Blue Jays would come into town, I'd try to see their games. And a couple of times I've gone up to Toronto for like a weekend,
Cool.
just to check out the city and check out games. So I went up with a friend to what used to be Sky Dome is now Rogers Center, and it's a great location for a park. I mean, it's right in the middle, right downtown in Toronto, right next to the CN Tower, that ridiculously tall tower that's next door. So did all the little touristy things. It was really fun, and we stayed at the hotel that is actually inside the park. So,
nice.
Yeah, if you look at the background, and it's the only park I think that does this, but if you look at the background behind, where you'd hit a home run in center field, you see the glass windows, and they're actually hotel rooms. You can stay in them, and you can watch a game from up there. You can watch them, hit BP. It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's a really fun experience. Even if you don't like the Blue Jays, it's just a fun trip.
Sure. Yeah, I know the Braves have a hotel just outside of the outer limits of outfield. I've looked into those rooms, and I'll never be staying in them. You're saying that this hotel is actually part of the stadium.
It's part of the stadium because it's a dome too. So like you're actually inside the stadium.
Oh, that's
So when you're after the games, you go up to the room. They did one of those things where they let all the kids run around the bases, like every kid in the stadium, and it was just sitting there, just like having a beer, looking out towards the stadium,
cool.
watching all the kids run around. It was just fun. It's a great park, and plus, like before the games, you'll watch the pitchers out there doing long toss, and it's just cool. So I decided one of the 3 games, we were going to 3 games, and one of them I was going to really spring for the best seats in the house. And so I'm going through like StubHub or something, and I find the best seats in the house. They are called the In the Action seats. And if you look...
Appropriately named.
It's called In the Action. So if you look at the park and the way it's laid out, down the first base line as every park is like that. It's a straight wall. And for whatever reason, they have this little jut out of one row into the field. And there's maybe, I don't know, 10 seats. It's not a lot. It's definitely not a lot. So I got seats in that row, and they were expensive seats, and the Blue Jays weren't even good this year, so it was, it was a waste of money to most people. So we go down there, and we're sitting down there, and I'm thinking to myself before the game starts, if the ball comes over to me, I'm like on the field. Mm-hmm. I can put my hand over the fence and touch the grass, like the turf.
So like a good fielder, you knew what you were going to do with the ball if it came your way.
That's what I was thinking, right? Because I didn't want to be the idiot, right, that does the wrong thing. You don't want to be the guy from the Cubs.
Bartman,
right? Yeah. Who, by the way, how has he not thrown a first pitch out at a Cubs game yet after they won the World Series?
He doesn't want to be
he does not want to be
at all, yeah.
I know. I feel bad about that story.
Too,
but, Bartman is the guy who kind of basically robs his team of a good play. So, and I'm thinking to myself, he took away a catch that could have happened, right? That's what he did. Mm-hmm. That was bad, right?
Yep.
Now, Jeffrey Mayer from the Yankees, in the Yankees game, reached over the fence and got a home run against the Orioles and pulled it back over the fence, and they gave the Yankees the home run. So my thought here is I'm trying to calculate this before the game.
Okay, so all right.
The ball comes over to me, and if a Blue Jay hits it, I want to grab it. Right? Yeah. If the other team hits it, I don't want to go near it because I want the Blue Jay to try to catch it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's my theory going into this game. And I have this all mapped out. Now, when the moment happens, I forget all of that. Like all I do is I see the ball and it's coming towards me. And it was Colby Rasmus that was up. Colby Rasmus is up. He's an outfielder. He was hitting like 202 at the time. So, I mean, the chances of him getting a hit were pretty low anyway. So he pops it up. It's coming right to me. And I'm like, oh my God, this ball's coming right to me.
And at that point, you don't remember who's batting, probably what city you're in, your name. The ball's just coming toward you.
My giant plan of what I'm going to do in this situation is totally out the window. Okay? So the ball's coming over to me, and I afterwards realize I've done, as according to my plan, the right thing, which is to try to catch the ball. A Blue Jay hit it. Uh-huh. I don't want to give they play the Rays, I think. I didn't want to give the Rays guy a chance to catch it, so I should go after the ball. But I don't have to go after the ball. The ball comes right to me.
Right to you.
Right to me. Right in my lap. So I'm standing up. I reach my hands up in the air. I'm well within where my seat is. Uh-huh. And I catch the ball, and I'm thinking to myself, the only thing that popped into my head in the middle of this was, don't be the idiot who drops it. Don't be the moron.
So now your priorities have changed.
Yes, totally. I just didn't want to drop the ball because I knew if I did, it would be on this network 5,000 times and everyone would be making fun of me. Uh-huh. So the ball comes out. I actually catch it, and I'm so excited. The crowd behind me goes crazy as soon as I catch it.
Yeah.
And I turn around and I give him this big, arms spread apart, what's up? That was the greatest catch of all time. And just as I do that gesture, the ump runs over and calls the batter out.
The Blue Jay.
The Blue Jay out. And so I'm like, I can't believe this. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm trying to get the judgment. I'm asking around, like, what happened? And he's like, I think you may have been in, I'm here with my friend. He's like, I think you might have been in the field of play. And I'm like, there is no way I was in the field of play. I would not do that. I stayed exactly where I was. I stood up. I reached my hands up. There's no way I was in the field of play. So I'm sitting there and I'm like all pissed off about this, and everybody around us there's all the buzzing going on, and we can't believe they called him out. And I'm holding the ball still, and this guy comes down, the security guy comes down, and he's like, hey, you gotta give me the ball. I'm like, oh, really? He's like, yeah. You gotta give it to me. So I give the security guy the ball, and he's like, what happened? And I'm like, I swear, I was not in the field of play. I stood up, I reached up. I remember this specifically. I didn't do it. I really would not do it, and I would never intentionally do something like that. So only in Toronto do they actually give me the ball back and let me stay in my seats, which is incredible. I would have been kicked out of every stadium in the United States.
Canada nice, right?
Canada nice. They let me stay in my seats. I keep the ball. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, I can't believe this. So I get on my phone eventually, and I'm like, I got to see if there's a replay or something. I go, and I get the replay. And actually, it was my friend. He pulled it up on his phone. He just looks at me, and he just goes, and he just holds the phone up. And as I see, the ball comes down. I am multiple feet into the field of play. Like, I am leaning way over the fence.
That is
My
awesome.
arms are outstretched.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, maybe it's not that bad. Then for some reason,
It's the angle.
they have the perfect angle right down the fence to see me go exactly how far. I literally take it from right above the Rays player's glove as he's about to catch it, and I take it out, snag it. Okay, it was a good call by the ump to call me out. But I do maintain that this guy was catching the ball anyway, so I didn't actually hurt
That's right.
the Blue Jays.
Okay.
It was not a negative effect.
You didn't cost them a world's championship, like
nothing like that.
Bartman did or anything?
No, it wasn't that bad.
What inning was that? Because if you had been kicked out, that would have been bad.
Yeah,
right?
it was very early. It was like I feel like it was like the maybe third or fourth inning. They were losing badly. It was a bad season. I mean, it could have been worse. But I remember going back and there's a lot of people will go and see. There's a particular montage on YouTube called like fan ejections.
Yes.
And I am in this.
Yes, you are.
First of all, fact check, did not get ejected. I did not get ejected for this. But I will say that like it comes back to me relatively often because people wind up seeing it just randomly in this YouTube thing. And, I long term, it was worth it. They actually he goes, oh, he thinks it's funny. He's not going to be laughing for long. That's what the announcer said. Like, good job, big guy. They said that. And then I remember waking up in the morning. You wake up in the morning, you're on like one of these trips, a guy trip, and you get up in the morning, you flip on SportsCenter. I flip on their equivalent of SportsCenter, and there's my fat face, just and my stupid like I'm the badass gesture, just as they called the guy out. It was a fun trip though, worth it.
That's awesome. And if you ever do see a compilation or some sort of new reference to Stu catching this foul ball at the Toronto Blue Jays game, be sure to tag him on social media. On Twitter, it's @StuDoesAmerica.
Yes, please do.
Okay, so we jumped right in there with your awesome story of... And by the way, if it makes you feel any better, I was actually ejected, not allowed to come back into a game once. Now that I think about this, I had just started at a radio station in Atlanta. It was the flagship of the Falcons. And the news director gave me a press pass and said, it's no big deal. They never check these things, whatever. So I go up there and I have Bill's press box pass, and I'm just up there. I'm just watching. He goes, the only rule, Keith, is you can't cheer. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. I'll just sit there quietly, right? So I ended up watching the Falcons and the Saints, and it was a terrible year. And as most of them are.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're gonna have to narrow it down a little bit.
Yeah, I was about 3 minutes into the game. And I was enjoying myself, and then up comes the guy who runs the press box there for the Falcons, the media guy, and he just asked to see my press pass. He goes, "You're not Bill," takes it, and he leads me to an Atlanta police officer who escorts me to the elevator, and out I went. So I ended up listening to the game. I had, if you remember these things, like a Walkman back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm on the MARTA train listening to the game instead of watching it in the press box. I go to work the next day expecting to get reamed by my former boss, Ken Charles, who calls me in and just says, "Dude, next time, why don't you just have them bring you up to the WGST booth? You could have watched the game with me, and Mikhail Gorbachev was at the game watching." So apparently I was supposed to be watching the game with Mikhail Gorbachev. Maybe that's why security was so tight or whatever.
Maybe, yeah.
But bottom line is...
That's a very random person to be watching a Saints-Falcons game.
Isn't that something? That was interesting, but... Anyhow, not as cool as your story. Didn't get a souvenir. Hell, I didn't even get to watch the game. But anyhow. Okay, so we jumped right into the sports stories there. Let's go back to the very beginning of your life. You were born, surprisingly, not in Toronto.
No.
Not in Philadelphia. You're an Eagles fan. You were born in Tarrytown, New York.
Yes.
Where is that in New York?
Tarrytown, the Tappan Zee Bridge is there.
Yeah.
That's exactly where Tarrytown is. It was a town that kind of got... They tried to... part of it was called Sleepy Hollow, and so like the famous story, obviously.
Yeah.
So they kind of tried to play that up since. But there's a famous country club there as well. Sleepy Hollow Country Club. Is
that the Sleepy Hollow from the story?
I think so. I don't know. I mean, but I was born there and lived in New York when I was very young.
Okay.
It's where my grandparents lived for most of their lives, and I would go up, every summer to go visit them. Near, not in Tarrytown, but near that area.
Okay, but you grew up mostly in Connecticut.
Yeah, we moved down to Connecticut before I went to school. So it was pretty early. I went to kindergarten in Connecticut. So my parents decided they didn't want me to go. We were living in Ossining, New York, which was where both of my parents grew up and met in high school. And they thought the town was a little too rough and tumble for a little boy of my toughness level, I guess. So they were like, why don't we move, I don't know, near the beach in Connecticut? It's about all that kid can take. So yeah, we moved near the beach in kind of the shoreline Connecticut area, and I grew up, in a town called Old Saybrook and then Clinton in Connecticut when I was young.
Okay, very good. And like me, you are an only child, except for, some stepbrothers.
Yeah, only childs rock. They're the best.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
We're better than you if you have brothers and sisters, just so you know.
And this is why we don't share things.
Mm-hmm. We're very special, and we want to be treated as very special. We want all the attention, and that's the way we are.
There's a reason why our parents stopped at 1. It's because they attained perfection early.
What are you going to do? You can't follow this thing up. That's pretty much what it was, I'm sure.
Now, when you were a kid, did you think, man, I want to grow up and have this kind of job, where you are co-host of a national radio show, host your own show on the network, Blaze TV? Did you think, man, I'm gonna do this someday?
Pretty young, yeah. I mean, I really got into the idea of wanting to do sports first, and so I was, I loved playing sports and was very, very into sports. Pretty much a big stat nerd. Before it was cool. Now all these guys, Moneyball. These guys can all be executives. Back in the day, no one cared. They didn't care that I liked stats. They just thought I was a loser. But I was very much into that, and I got into wanting to do kind of first off, really wanting to do sort of play-by-play and calling games. We used to go and have the typical story. I had the tape recorder. This was back in the cassette days. We'd roll the tape recorder, and we would call games and do play-by-play and color, watch the games on TV and record them and record to cassette and then listen back to them. And I did that. I really wanted to do that for a very long time. I got into sports talk radio kind of after that. Okay. I listened to WFAN in New York quite a bit, and my dad used to listen to. That was when Imus was on. It was Imus and Mike and the Mad Dog, and it was just an incredible lineup, an incredible station, and I listened to that all the time, and I really got into sports radio and kind of wanted to do that for a while. And over time, I guess it was probably, high school, maybe after high school, I started kind of getting some interest into the more newsy politics sort of side of things. I listened to Rush Limbaugh when I was right after high school, particularly listening to him a little bit and kind of being amazed that every single point that people brought up, he always had a great answer to it.
Right.
And I was never, we weren't a particularly political household, I wouldn't say. But I do remember, back in the day watching Family Ties and thinking Michael J. Fox was cool. And it's like, that's the exact opposite of what you're supposed to take from that show. He was supposed to be the loser.
I know.
And he was supposed to be, I thought he was the coolest kid in the world.
You and I, man, I swear, we've had the same experiences.
I know.
We were born months apart. We were both into sports talk radio. In fact, how I discovered Rush is because I had the Falcons were blacked out quite a bit in Atlanta. And so you'd have to listen to them on the radio.
Right.
And I remember one day, for whatever reason it was, teachers' conference, something like that, I came home and the radio that was tuned to the Falcons from the day before or what have you, there's this guy, Rush Limbaugh. I started listening, and I was in high school, and I was hooked. So I'm right there with. I mean, this is the exact same path, including the Michael J. Fox on Family Ties thing. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's funny because I always think it's kind of strange that I remember several years ago there was kind of a big fight between Rush and Michael J. Fox because he said something. He made some joke about him on the air, and it was kind of one of those 2-week controversies where Rush Limbaugh said this about poor Michael J. Fox, and it was a big media dust up. And I'm like, these are kind of the two guys that are most responsible for me being a conservative. And it's like Rush would be proud probably of converting someone. Michael J. Fox would be horrified. He was converting people to being Republicans without his knowledge.
Without knowing what he was doing. That's funny. When did you meet up with Glenn? When did he come into your world?
Well, after high school, I went down to Florida and I listened to one of our now affiliates, WIOD in Miami, and they had a legendary lineup at this time. This was they had Phil Hendry, local during afternoons. Wow. Before him was Neil Rogers, who was an absolute legend. I think it was Rick and Suds in the morning. And but it was just a great lineup beginning to end. And that's when I first sort of it was really Phil Hendry more than anybody else that really got me started in that like idea of being able to talk about things like in the news, but doing them in an entertaining, sort of funny way. Now, Phil Hendry has an amazing. He's 1,000 times more talented than pretty much anybody in the industry, and also has a very specific thing that he does. But like, I love the idea of that. I mean, we're never going to do that type of show, but the idea of being able to bring emotion and laughter and passion to this thing that across the nation, about 90% of the time was, we're going to talk about what the top tax rate should be today. It's we should what is this is the intermittent break of so you're like, okay, this is just dull and boring, even though it might be important.
Yeah. Time out. He says he doesn't do this kind of Phil Hendry type show, but yet he is the man of many voices, many of them through the telephone, such great legendary voices. I should have made a list before we did this, but, Wilfred from Sun City, Florida.
Yeah. From Sun City, Florida.
Thank you. Oh, my gosh. Your Bill O'Reilly. Recently, I was literally rolling in the other room.
That's not as much of an impression. That's just Bill's mannerisms. Where I don't even know what he was doing that day, but he was just cracking me up. He just comes up someday, like he's so funny. He's just like some days he's really fired up and focused and like he knows exactly what he's going to say. And other days Glenn will ask him this like really detailed question. He goes, "I don't know, Beck." That's it. And he's like, all right. Well, thanks for coming on, Bill. But yeah, no, I mean, we do a little bit of that, just mainly to illustrate something that's gone on in the show or some point. But it's nowhere near the type of show that Phil Hendry does, and I think he still does a podcast. I think he does, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I kind of got into that world where I wanted to do kind of a more entertaining type of radio. Mm-hmm. So when I came back home to Connecticut, and I wanted to start getting into the industry. I had done maybe an internship here or there, but not a lot. I hadn't really done anything. And I saw a job opening for promotions person at KC 101 in New Haven, Connecticut, which was the station that I grew up listening to. Was kind of like the pop station, like they'd have like the 80s, back in the 80s they'd have the countdown with Casey Kasem and Rick Dees. It was like that type of station. It was like all the hits. And with the exception of one brief period in the 90s where it inexplicably just turned into an alternative station for like a year. And that was my type of music. I mean, we kind of we have similar taste in music. Yeah. And that was my type of music. I loved that station in that period. It was like the mid 90s. And they had, as a morning show, Glenn and Pat in the morning. Wow. Like when I was a kid, that was like, I was like a teenager. And that was the big morning show in town, like Glenn and Pat. Now, I didn't listen to Glenn and Pat that much. I knew who they were. They were the big show, but I didn't listen to them that much. I got up like 5 minutes before I was supposed to be at school. So I never really listened to morning radio, but I knew of them, and they were the big show on all the billboards and everything. And so I went to work at this station, basically hanging balloons, going out to, appearances with the different DJs. You're handing out stickers and prizes. It was the very base level show. And one day I was with Glenn at one of his appearances, maybe the second or third one I had ever done with him. And he was, it was like a car dealership. Uh-huh. And Glenn you got to understand, Glenn at this point in his career is not the Glenn Beck of today. Glenn is like, just this, you almost see him like as a character on WKRP in Cincinnati, right? Like he's like
that's well said.
A frustrated host that used to be a big deal, and at this point is just miserable. Does not want to do this job anymore. He brought on this guy Vinny Penn, who's a really talented, funny guy, and he was basically letting him do the show. He would just like turn on the mic, KC 101, that was a hot hit from What's-Her-Face, and so Vinny, what about this? And then Vinny would just rant and be funny. That was basically the show at this point. He did not care. Uh-huh. And so I was talking to him about just radio in general, he took the time to ask me about what I wanted to do with my life, basically, and what I wanted to do with my career. And the reason he asked me that was not because he was actually interested. It was because no one was at the appearance. It was just me and him. And it was very awkward because he was getting paid a lot of money to be at this car dealership, and no one showed up. Oh, boy. So we're sitting here kind of just BSing, and I kind of told him my interest and kind of, I was an excitable God, what was I, like 19 or 20, something like that. I was very excited to get into the industry, and like I had, big plans and big ideas. And, you could see that spark, I think, out of someone who was young. And I told him that I wanted to do talk radio, which, of course, only a loser at 19 years old wants to do talk radio.
Oh, yeah, totally. Only,
right.
Only a loser.
Me and you, right? Like, I rest my case. So he thought that was interesting, and he was looking to change up his career. He was, instead of talking to Britney Spears records, he wanted to be talking about the news. And he was, was an older guy and had opinions on the news. So he wanted to start a talk show. Couldn't believe he stumbled into someone who was basically going to work for free who would do anything to produce a show. So he kind of tested me out on the morning show first, gave me little assignments that I would actually do, unlike everyone else that came in. Everyone else was like trying to get free tickets and hook up with girls, and I knew I didn't really want to see any shows, and no girls wanted to see me. So it was very easy for me to just do the work and show up every day, and that's half the battle. It's probably 3/4 of the battle today. So just showing up was a big deal. And so I worked with him for a while. He wanted to launch a talk radio show, and I was there for the launch.
Very cool. Very cool. And the rest is history, right? I love the story about how, because your name's Steve.
Oh, yes.
Your name is Steve.
My name is Steve.
But yet it's Stu.
And
tell us how that happened.
Well, it was one of the first appearances. I think it was the first time I ever actually met Glenn. And it was at a bar. It was called. I think it was called Humphreys, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And they had a gig there that they did every week, Glenn and Vinny. And these gigs, as you know, people don't know necessarily who aren't in radio, but you could get some good cash for this. At least you could back in the day. I don't know what it's like now, but you could make a lot of extra money going to these bar appearances and hanging out with the listeners for a couple of hours. It was like a nice part of your compensation.
Right.
And so they would go out and they had a weekly gig. It was like a Wednesday or Thursday night where they would go out there. And of course, Glenn's a recovering alcoholic. Why he's doing a bar gig, who knows? It's just part of this stupid industry. And it's one of my first days on the job in the promotions department where I'm going to hang balloons. So I go out, I blow up balloons, I hang balloons. I'm supposed to stand there. I don't know anything about what I'm doing yet. It may have been the first thing that I ever did. Now that I think about it. And so Vinny, who is Glenn's partner on the morning show, a very outgoing guy, very friendly guy. He'll come up to you, just starts talking to you, joking with you. So he comes up to me, and it's very loud. And they had just come from a Bon Jovi concert. So there's a Bon Jovi concert that night. They did a meet and greet with Bon Jovi and some of the listeners.
Okay.
And this guy, Vinny, is a huge Bon Jovi fan. Like the biggest Bon Jovi fan I've ever met in my entire life by 1,000 miles. I just don't. I mean, I've met some pretty big Bon Jovi fans actually, being from the Northeast. This guy is like the biggest. So he meets him. I think he got his guitar signed. He is in euphoric state. Of course, because he's meeting his hero, he has too many drinks before it, and then he's going to a bar. So he's hammered at this point. So he comes up. He's talking to me. I'm I don't know anything. I've never met him. Yeah, I'm intimidated. I'm just starting out. But he's very friendly, talks to me, and he says, "What's your name?" And I say, "Steve." And what he hears is "st," does not hear the whole name, and just kind of assumes it's Stu. Now, later on, I think it was the same night, clarifies like, "Oh, Steve. Well, I'm just going to keep calling you Stu." He thought it was funny. I'm like, because he said my name, and I'm like, "No, it's Steve." And he's like, "Oh, I'm just going to keep calling you Stu." Awesome. So he keeps calling me Stu. Later on in that night, I meet Glenn, and Glenn is not an outgoing guy. He's much more reserved. He's kind of sitting in the back. He's not mingling nearly as much. We don't talk all that much. So eventually we go through this thing. I have this meeting with him that I described before at the car dealership. And I start interning on the morning show. I'm on the morning show a lot. Then I wind up being kind of getting hired and becoming the producer and all these things. And somewhere in that process, we're on the air, and it might have been my birthday, and we're talking for some reason about my birthday. I don't know. Glenn was very desperate for content at this point. And he says something like, Stu, what happened with that? Would your mom have a bowl of stew and just name you Stu? I remember that joke because it really wasn't his strongest joke. It was not.
Especially when you consider that's not even your name.
Right. And I said, well, that's an interesting story. I mean, it would be really funny if it was actually my name, but it's not my name, just so you know. And this is on the air.
On the air.
And now it's been months where he's been calling me Stu. Now, I kind of thought the lore of this story kind of winds up me being like, when he tells it, you didn't even correct me. You could have just told me. You could have corrected me. Now, first of all, he was oblivious to everything, so he wouldn't have noticed anyway. Secondarily, I kind of just thought he was in on the joke, right? I thought he just knew Vinny's joke and was thinking it was funny, so he went along with it. But no, he was just oblivious and didn't know my name. So months of this go by, and finally he gets it kind of revealed, slapped into his face in the middle of the show.
On the air.
And the result of this is sad in that, my mom and my dad named me Steve. Was named after my dad. And now I am called Stu by literally every single person in my life with the exception of my mom. And some other close relatives, from back in the day. But everybody I know now calls me Stu. Which is why I go out of my way, when I'm coaching my kids' Little League team, to be like, Coach Steve. You know what? Steve is my name, at least for this the next 45 minutes.
Now, what if some kid called you Stu, though? How would you take that?
I mean, I don't care. You realize I really don't care, but it's nice to at least keep it alive,
Yeah.
It is my name and everything. I like it to be alive on something other than a tax form.
Other than a legal document,
yes.
Exactly. There's other jobs that you've done. I got to explore. What is a spot welder? What is that? What is that? What it sounds like to me,
okay.
It sounds like a way that I could injure myself that I haven't yet accomplished.
Yes. First of all, it absolutely is.
Okay.
So in high school, you could go work at a fast food place, or you can go work, mowing lawns, or you can do those things. I came up with, I think, which was a brilliant life hack at this time. And I did it with a couple of my friends, which was the temp agency. Now, the temp agency that we went to would give us these jobs. And the big thing when you're in that age group, the biggest problem you have is you do a job for 2 weeks. You're absolutely bored of it. You want to kill yourself, but you have to keep doing it, and it drags on for the whole summer. Temp agency was the other side of this. I don't even know if these things exist anymore, to be honest. But you would go in there and you'd get a job for 1 week. And you'd work at a place for 1 week. And then the job would end, and you go back to the temp agency, and they'd give you another job for 1 week. So you'd be half the time you're kind of just learning it, and it's new, and you don't get bored of it. It doesn't seem nearly as tedious. So I did all sorts of jobs for this. I mean, I worked for a service master type of place where I would go in after fires and clean soot off of walls. Some of the jobs sucked.
Wow.
I worked for Turtle Wax. Turtle Wax, is that a company that people know?
Yep.
And I had shipping things, and I apparently shipped too many wrong things to the wrong people, so I got blown out of that place. And it was every week you'd be in another job. The spot welder job was a job I worked with a guy, I think his name was Nate. And really, so I was not actually a spot welder. I was a spot welder's assistant, which is kind of like Dwight on The Office. I was assistant to the spot welder. I wasn't assistant spot welder. I was assistant to the spot welder.
Awesome.
And this guy Nate was the spot welder, and he did all these basically I don't know how to explain it except it would be these giant sheets of metal. And they'd need to join in two different places, and they need to be bent and then joined into certain places. So it was like a weld, not a long line of a weld, if you picture it that way, which is a little tiny spot. There'd be spots all over, and they had this particular thing. And so it was really hot. Sparks flew all over the place.
Yeah.
It was summer, and there was no air conditioning.
Oh no.
So it was windows, doors open. It's again, it's Connecticut, so it's not 110 degrees, but it's 90 degrees and really humid.
Yeah.
And it is awful. It's tough. And the one thing I'll remember about that job, other than it being really hard work and Nate being a good guy, or at least a nice guy, I don't know if he was a good guy or not, because one of the first things he said to me once I started was to offer for me to buy drugs from him. Now, I'm a total loser, and I would this is not even I wouldn't even know what he was talking about. I have no concept. I played sports. That's all I basically did. So I did not buy drugs from him. In fact, I didn't even know what he was talking about. He was trying to walk me through with all the lingo that you use as a drug dealer, and I did not understand what he was saying. I don't know if he thought it was a cop wearing a wire. I was trying.
If it makes you feel any better, I had a guy move into college when I was going to school at Nebraska. And first thing he said to me, "Hey man, you know I can get some bud?" I said, "You know what? I don't drink. I know that I got some friends here that," which was true. I didn't drink at the time.
Right. You're like two steps below where you're supposed to be.
And my friends who were hanging out were like laughing. They're like, "Dude, he's talking about marijuana." I was like, "Oh my bad.
My bad.
Sorry." So I've been there. I know what you mean.
Yes, I've never been cool, so that's never actually happened.
Okay, so spot welder's assistant. Mm-hmm. I know there's a story in there with your furniture delivery stuff.
I did work furniture. Yes, I was after a while, I graduated from the spot welder, taking soot off of wall jobs. There's 2 levels of the temp agency. And once I got friendly with the lady who was giving out the jobs, I was able to kind of worm myself into the office side of things.
Into the places where they're climate controlled.
Right.
Okay.
The office side of things is like, it's like the upgrade, right? You're going into the major leagues now. And so I got a job at a place called BKM, which was it's still around. I think I got bought by somebody, but I think it's still around. It's like a big office furniture provider, and in Connecticut. And my friends were getting the job at on the delivery trucks. They would go and have to lift the furniture and bring it into each room. I got a job as a scheduler.
Nice.
So I was assistant to this one guy, a great guy, Ed, who passed away years ago now. But he was a really nice guy and just was super cool. And so I was able to do schedule furniture deliveries and installations. That was my job. And again, I have no ability to do these things. I'm just making it up as I go along. He's trying to teach me. He thinks I'm a complete idiot probably because I can't figure this stuff out. But this was right in our crossover time when I was doing that job when I started in radio. So I would go in with Glenn in the morning at 5:30 in the morning, and I would work. Eventually got this worked out, so I would work 5:30 to 10 on the morning show with Glenn. I would drive immediately from there to the delivery installation furniture job and work 10:30 to 4. Then I would go from there, I'd go back to the station and work with Michael Mays, the afternoon guy, from 4:30 to, I guess it was 7 or 8. And then I would have these promotions at night. So it was just these days were endless, but I just loved it. I love doing it, and when you're in that mode where you just don't care. You don't care. I didn't care about anything else in my life. I didn't. I never talked to a girl in this period. I barely had any friends, but I was just there working all the time.
So you mentioned, not meeting girls, but at some point you met your wife, Lisa.
I did.
How did that happen?
So I'm on. This is when I'm at the same station, KC 101, and she. I was working for the morning show as the producer of the morning show at this point. My first actual job in radio, that wasn't part-time, it was my first job on a show. And I'm working there for, I don't know how long it could have been. It couldn't have been, wasn't even a full year working on that job. And the midday girl who's in after us gets a new intern. And I'm noticing this particular intern... pretty good looking. Now, that sounds pretty creepy now. However, I will say this is 1998. So I am, at this point, 22. Yeah. And she's 20-ish. So, it's not creepy, as creepy as it sounds when you're saying I'm hitting on an intern. Funny part about this, the timing of that is the Monica Lewinsky time. That's going on right then. So, Bill Clinton is being busted for dating interns. We're talking about it on the air while I'm dating an intern.
Wow.
Which was bizarre.
Awkward.
But, and again, I tell you, Keith, I have absolutely no game whatsoever. I would have probably never talked to my wife, Lisa, even though I thought she, was very good looking and wanted to talk to her.
What was your in?
So yeah, we have this, so pathetic. This is a very pathetic story. I warn you in advance. So we have, doing local radio, you'll remember this, Keith. You sometimes, if you're a big show, you'll get these trips and you'll go, we went to, I think it was Atlantis in the Bahamas. Okay. It was right when it's opening.
Oh, wow.
So it's me, Glenn, Vinny, maybe a couple of other tech people and stuff. And we get to, a week to do shows. We're doing the show live from Atlantis in the Bahamas. It was the second week it was open or something. Is
this where you do the show in the morning and then you're free the rest of the day? Or?
Yeah, pretty much. Cool. It was just the morning show, so we had some prep and stuff to do, but it was pretty free.
All right.
It was a fun time. Everything was paid for. It was pretty cool.
Nice.
So before we went on this trip, I would talk to Barb, who was the lady at the front desk, and Barb was awesome. She was just she knew everybody. She was just the best. And so I would be walking out. She was kind of the confession booth for everybody at the station. You know, it was that type of thing. So I went up. I multiple times had gone up to her and said, she's like, she would say to me, like, you like that Lisa, don't you? And she just picked this stuff up. You know? And I'd be like, she's pretty good looking. You know, she would never talk to me in 100 years, but she's. And if you've ever seen my wife, you can see her on social media and such. She's very much out of my league.
What's her handle for people?
She is Lisa Page Made Me Do It. She has a podcast. You can go subscribe to that. She would love that, of course. But she's on Instagram a lot.
Made Me Do It.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she's wanting to get into radio as well. Much more naturally talented than I am, and also very good looking. So I had mentioned it to Barb a few times, just as a conversation, that we'd had. She's like, you should talk to her. And I'm like, I'm never going to talk to her. That's not going to happen. So anyway, while I'm away at the Bahamas, Barb, this woman who's, much older, I don't remember what her age was, but she was, she was like, older than I, not like in our age group. And she decided to pull Lisa aside and say, that's Stewie. He loves you. Oh, no. Oh, Stewie, he likes you. You should talk to him. Uh-huh. And she does the whole pitch for me. So I don't have any of the awkward moments. Now, I don't even know this is happening. I get back and she says, by the way, I talked to Lisa about you. I'm like, horrified, right? Like, no, you don't understand. I wanted to live my life alone. That was my plan. I had it all mapped out. I'm living the life perfectly. I've nailed this lifestyle.
Barb, I was just making conversation when I was up here with you.
Yes. And so she apparently talked to Lisa about me and said you should give me your number. I'll give it to Stu. Uh-huh. So I get back from this trip and just get handed this phone number, and I'm just of course mortified. But Barb gave me the sense that it went pretty well. So now that the hard work is done, I'm like, I might as well call. Uh-huh. So I actually do call. We have a nice conversation. We go out a couple days later, and basically have gone out every day since.
That is awesome. Yeah. That is very cool.
I don't know how it happened. It's inexplicable. Yes, a lot of people have messaged me on social media pointing out that I've married up. I don't need to hear it again, really. I've heard it. So just in case you're thinking about doing it again, you don't need to.
This has been At the Mic with Keith, an independent podcast production. Look for At the Mic Show on Twitter to connect.